And today we have the privilege to introduce you our keynote speaker, Eric Toda, the global head of social marketing at Meta and executive general manager of Meta Prosper. Thank you for being here, Eric.
What's up, everybody? Thanks for having me. This is awesome. Do you want me to get started? Should I go?
Yep, the floor is yours.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. I didn't know if there was more than that. First off, I just wanted to say just how great it is to see everybody. It truly is an honor, especially following Cindy Gallup's incredible keynote last year for you all. And thank you again, Bernice and Jesselyn. One, for inviting me, but two, for putting this together. As mentioned, I'm Eric Toda, and I'm the global head of social marketing at Meta. I'm also the executive general manager of Meta Prosper, which turns one today, and it's dedicated to serving the Asian American community of small businesses and nonprofits. So we're really proud. I'm proud to be here with all of you. And I say it's an honor because, frankly, when I joined the industry about 18 years ago, I couldn't even begin to dream of what Asians in advertising as an organization would even look like. In many ways, I actually felt like I was one of the only, honestly, Asians in advertising. And so today, I'm honored to be with you to share some of the more defining moments in my almost 20-year career, and really some of the struggles that I've had with my career, my identity, and what I've learned. I also hope that you really, really embrace being in this incredible industry. As you know, and maybe you follow me, and maybe you've heard me speak before, I try to really advocate not just for our own community, but for this industry. This industry means the world to me, and I hope it means the world to you too. And so I really do want you to embrace our ability collectively to change minds, perceptions, and habits, literally just by the work that we do every single day. And I did also want to add too, if I don't inspire you, let this really be a cautionary tale then of what not to do. So as an introduction, I'm fourth generation Japanese American from Central California. So pre-Gold Rush, my family is a family of farmers from Central Cal, specifically Monterey. So it's great to see Monterey Bay Aquarium as a sponsor today, and it's very close to my heart. On my mother's side, I'm first generation Filipino. My mother's from Manila. As you may have recognized by now, I'm wearing an Asian American Girl Club hat, and Ali Maki is a huge friend of mine. Our families were in the Japanese incarceration camps together in the 1940s. And it turns out too, I found this out about a couple of years ago, our grandfathers also fought in World War II together for the 442nd Regiment, which still today is the most recognized and decorated regiment in US Army history, all Japanese. So I try to rep Ali Maki as much as humanly possible. She's like a sister to me. So please go follow Asian American Girl Club too. So where I'm from a small town in the Bay Area called Moraga, on the outskirts, where my family was one of the only families of color. I could tell you all the times. I could go for a list of all the racist things that have happened to me. But the truth is, that's not what defined me. I started. When I was growing up, to many of the white people I grew up around, I was the most Asian person they've ever seen, mostly because they haven't seen any Asian people. But to the Asian people in San Francisco, where my cousins are from, because they grew up with almost all Asians, I was the whitest person they've ever seen because of where I was from and how I grew up. So not knowing really how to embrace my identity defined my desire to belong. To find somewhere I belonged. And as time went on, that became a driving point in my career. Some of you don't know this, some of you do. If I've spoken to you, I'm actually a law school dropout. I dropped out of law school in 2008 to join a small startup called Facebook. 2008 was a great time to drop out of law school, by the way, in the middle of the recession. I applied to about 200 jobs, every job you could ever think of, from being a barista to working at the mayor's office, you name it, I applied for it. And literally the only job that called me back was this company called Facebook. Facebook was around 200 people back then. And again, this is before iPhone. This is before Blackberries. This is before all of that. It was literally just a website, which is hard to imagine. But I joined the advertising operations team, in which my job was to put ads on the site. And one of the things that was told to me very early on when I started my career at Facebook, my father pulled me aside and he told me, Eric, if you're going to enter into this workplace, if you're going to enter into this industry, you have to know it's white dominated. And you being an Asian man, there's only one way that you're going to be able to survive. And that's when the white executive speaks to you. Don't look them in the eye. Just look down and just keep your head down and do your work. Now, a lot of you may say, that's crazy that he would tell you. Your own father would tell you that. But again, as I mentioned, my family's from the Japanese incarceration camps. And so what that is generational trauma that has become more of a suggestion to us of how we survive in this world. And when he told me that, obviously, I took it a certain way, but I knew then that I was entering into a space of uncharted waters. And so to me, I focused on growing my skills, didn't focus on my ethnicity or anything like that. But I learned that as I was focusing on my skills, my reputation was growing internally at Facebook as a strong performer. And I started to feel like through this, because of my reputation, because of my strength as a marketer, because of my strength as an advertiser, I could start to speak up. And I remember in one strategy meeting, the head of West Coast sales was going through the yearly strategy, and I didn't like it. I thought it was wrong. And I was sitting there with my computer and debating internally, do I speak up? Debating internally, do I challenge this? No one was challenging. And again, I was one of the only people of color in that room. But I said, F it. I was like, you know what? I think this is the right thing to do. And I do think I need to speak up. So I raised my hand, I spoke up, I challenged, maybe arrogantly. But the head of West was like, yeah, you're absolutely right, Eric. And we will change the strategy. Now that could be the end of the story, but it isn't, because after that meeting, a white executive, a sales manager pulled me aside and he told me, Eric, don't ever do that again. He's like, you're good. You're very, very good, but don't ever do that again. He's like, don't challenge like that. Don't speak up. You people don't do that. Like, just sit down, do your work, and your work will speak for yourself. It will get you the awards. It will get you the recognition you need. You don't need to go in there and challenge every single leader that you don't like what they're saying. And I realized at that time I had two choices to make. I could continue to challenge and hone that craft, or I can listen to him as a caution and say, you know what, I am going to sit down and I am going to work really hard. And, maybe I'll fly under the radar and they'll recognize me. But what I did instead was I kept challenging. I kept challenging myself to speak up. I kept challenging myself to show up, and I kept challenging myself to be where I could make a difference. I realized that in this budding digital marketing industry, this could be, because of how I was doing it, this could be a place where I'm respected for what I do, not who I am and not what I see in the mirror. But they still never took me to a meeting, and I was still very internal. So now my early success was very isolated. And while I was building my reputation internally, I realized that many of the sales teams wanted to bring me into meetings as a creative strategist. Because again, at this time, many brands, many agencies were trying to figure out how they integrate Facebook, how they integrate social media marketing into their plans. Again, this is like early 2009, 2010. And so they didn't really know how to speak to it. They knew how to speak to the ads. So they brought me along to these meetings. And they're like, Eric, you're here for support. You don't have any speaking points. You don't have a slide on the deck. You're here for support. So if people ask, you can then answer. No one asked any questions, but I remember my very first meeting was in the Publicis building in Seattle. I was 23 years old and I was so nervous. I was wearing my dad's suit. And when we sat down at the table, I was shaking. I was shaking because I was like, well, what if they do ask me a question? How do I respond? But I was ready to go, and they didn't let me talk once. And every time new client teams came into the door to talk with us, I realized again and again, I was the only person of color. But then on the second day, as I started to expect, wearing my dad's suit, I sat down and I was like, okay, it's going to be like yesterday. I'm not going to talk again. I'm kind of here just for whatever. I see across from me the Best Buy team. and the Best Buy team has one Asian woman. And I was like, well, maybe she's like me. Maybe she's not being told to talk or anything like that. But she led the entire meeting, and she was smart. She was bold. She was not shy at all, how Facebook ads were working for her clients. And she looked at me, and she looked at me directly because she knew who I was. And she's like, Eric, you work on ads. And I was like, yeah, I work on ads. She's like, yeah, I got a lot of feedback for you. And she called me out, and she made me prove myself in that meeting. And after that, I never, ever, ever sat silent in a meeting ever again. And so I thank her for that, because what it did, it opened the door for me to speak in that meeting and every meeting after that. And her name was Carolyn B. And she was at Razorfish. So if you know Carolyn, I just want to say thank you so much for being one of the biggest inflection points in my career. And she really helped this voice that you hear today. Now, eventually I left Facebook to go to Nike, and then to Snapchat, and then to Airbnb on all marketing leadership teams. And through these companies, I worked with some of the greatest CMOs you could possibly dream of: Jonathan Mildenhall, Andrea Mallard, Jesse Stolik. And they pushed me to be more creative, pushed me to create hotter culture shifting work. And you know what I did? I did because I had so much strength in my voice, so much confidence in who I was. And at the age of 30 at Airbnb, I won what is known as the Advertising Grand Slam. In one season, Cannes, Webbies, Clio's, Shorties, Ad Age swept the entire award season for the work that we were doing at Airbnb. The career I built for myself over the nearly 20 years was truly built on output, and selfishly really focused on myself. But still, in many ways, I was always hiding who I was. Executives would ask me about my ethnicity. Eric, what are you? Where are you from, Eric? And I would divert the conversation. Let's talk about shoes, or let's talk about travel. Anything that could bring attention to what I saw in the mirror, to what you see today, I didn't have confidence in, and so I would dodge it. Sorry, it's tough to even talk about this now. But that was a barrier I realized I also had to overcome: my own insecurities. Why? Because despite the Advertising Grand Slam and the success I found at this point, I still felt in my heart I didn't belong to any community, except for marketing, except for advertising, because I really, really, really focused on making that my identity. But then, with the pandemic and the rise of Asian hate in 2020 and 2021, which still continues on today, don't get me wrong, it still continues today, I realized that my perspective might need to change about who I was, because there was something truly greater at stake. The more disturbing thing about this time, as we start to reflect on it, was that no one seemed to care. Literally, no one seemed to care. No media outlets, no flashy hashtags, no IG posts or influencers. And there was a deafening silence that broke so many of our hearts as we were getting attacked every single day. And not just us, our grandparents. And I learned from a few sources that Adweek was reaching out to a number of prominent Asian executives in our industry for thoughts, for quotes. And I learned that, disappointingly, almost all of them said no. They felt it was too hot. They felt it was too much. And they felt that it would jeopardize their career. And then they came to me. And frankly, I admit this now. I said no initially. I said no because when they asked me, I said, give me a day. And I went to my parents, and my parents told me not to write it. They told me not to say anything. They told me that someone else would say it, some celebrity. Daniel Day Kim, he'll say it. That it was too much. But here's the thing. I felt so disrespected by the industry, especially during the Super Bowl of 2021, because I looked at every single one of those spots, and none of them talked about what was happening to our community. Now, listen, I've been grateful to run Super Bowl spots, but I also know that you could change them 24 hours in advance. You could flip them real quick. And I knew some of those media buyers that bought those spots were Asian. And to not see one message defending us after a week of violence against us, I felt so disrespected. And I knew our community was suffering. And that was when I knew that there were powers in our industry that could have decided against this. They could have pivoted. They could have just even acknowledged, use a hashtag, whatever, right? And again, I've given everything to this career. I've suppressed everything about who I was so that I could build this incredible career for our industry, and just like you have. And for the industry to turn away from us, to not acknowledge us, it was truly, truly heartbreaking. So that's when I sat down and with a couple glasses of tequila, and I wrote, "My people are dying in silence, and I'm here with a megaphone." I sat on the piece for 48 hours. I didn't send it in. I didn't sleep. I cried a bunch because I felt like I was giving up my career by writing it, just like everybody else was telling me. Because I wondered, what if it fails? What if no one reads it? And in poker, many times you're given the chance to go all in, to push everything you have into the middle of the table, to be all in on the gamble. And despite my fears and despite my concerns, my parents telling me otherwise, I said, F it. I knew we had to do this. I knew someone had to say it. And so I sent it in. I cried all morning, the morning that it launched. And then I started to get texts. And then I started to get DMs. And then, like so many campaigns that I've worked on in my career, those numbers started to dance. I get a frantic call from Adweek that morning saying that the site can't handle the traffic, that they need to switch to different servers. I started to get DMs from CNN, Wall Street Journal, NBC, and it started to blow up my Instagram. Then I started to see celebrities repost it. Lucy Liu, Lisa Ling, Simu, and Henry Golding. And then Henry took it one step further. Elena on my team loves this story. He wanted to take it one step further, and he asked to go live on IG with me. My first time ever doing anything like this. And this guy, this incredibly handsome human being, wants to go on IG live talking about why I wrote this. And as marketers and advertisers, you get asked literally all the time. And I know this, especially for you at agencies, mostly from a client just like me, to make it go viral. I'm sure you've heard that quite a bit. But to see something you literally poured everything of yourself into go viral was a completely different feeling. And I realized by speaking up that I might have changed everything about how I view the world, because I was seeing people with my face who I once thought would never embrace me were sharing the piece with their own story. Sorry, it's I'm just remembering it really gets me emotional about it, because I felt like I belonged. Because people like you, the people of this organization, the almost 300 people on this call, you made me feel like I belonged when I never did before. Because what that wasn't just my career, it was my career and my identity converging at the exact same time. Now imagine how that feels in the heart. I mean, that's why I feel the way I do about it. And what I realized in writing that piece was that it was only the beginning for us, for our generation, but also for those in the industry to find our voices as leaders, like you, Bernice, and you, Jesselyn, and all of you on here. Finding our voices is so damn important. And I recognize that for some, it may not be comfortable to show up. I get that. I get that all day, because it might be scary and it might be difficult. And here's the thing too, the uncomfortable truth, which I'm sure all of you know because you write briefs all the time. You know what the uncomfortable truth is. The uncomfortable truth is we don't speak up because our community has a tendency to harshly criticize our own. And that can hinder you from speaking up. But I will tell you this, there is nothing more powerful than someone who is unafraid of being themselves. And my hope is that through what I've said today, you don't just show up for yourself, but you show up for those you hope to see across the table, just as I did with Carolyn. Now, it is one of the greatest honors to be a leader for the marketing and advertising industry. But to do it looking like this, looking like us, looking like my kids, well, I'll just say this, that I will continue to give everything every bit of who I am, just as I did before, but even more so now, not just to show you all the doors that I walked through, to be the only Asian person in the room, to be the only person of color in the room. I will hold those doors open so that you can walk through for me, because that's the most important thing. Now, as I wrap up, I wanted to share one last story. Recently, I met an agency, Barrett Hoffer, out of San Francisco, and they came to me because they wanted to help the API community. They wanted to create something. Now, immediately what you're thinking in your head is, oh, great, an Asian agency that wants to create an Asian spot. No, they're not an Asian agency. And I think that's the most important thing to make, is that typically what we do ends at the walls of our community. And it's so important to me that we are spoken about, not just during May, not just when red envelopes come out, but every single day. We're the fastest growing population in the United States, half of that fueled by immigration. And so we need to make sure our agencies, every agency, not just Asian American agencies, continue to produce for us, continue to tell our stories, continue to integrate our faces into the work. And so Barrett Hoffer wanted to do it because they believe in the same mission and same reason you are all here today, that we have to break down the barriers that limit us from reaching our maximum potential. And so I'm very, very honored, very, very honored to share what they created alongside so many teams, including my own Meta Prosper team. And this is an exclusive Asians in Advertising world premiere of our APAHM anthem. And so with that, please roll it.
An older couple. A younger couple. A father and son. A young family. Another young family. Do you know what they all have in common? They're American.
Well, thank you so much for letting me share it. And now I'm really excited. Again, I want to hear your story, Bernice and Jessalyn. And yeah, just again, thank you so much for letting me open it up.
I mean, if you were tracking the chat, or if you have time later to go through it, you got so much love. And when you gave that story about how hard it was to put yourself out there, I remember I was looking for that community and I found your article. And it chokes me up just thinking about when I read your words for the first time, and it meant so much to me to see that. And I think I DM'd you too, and you actually wrote back. And so I'm so grateful for you to share that. And we are so blessed to have you here today. And I'm not crying.
You're gonna make me cry.
You shared so many nuggets. But what would you really want to share with the community today about one tip about what you wish you learned earlier in your career?
I think the biggest tip that I have is don't be afraid of who you are. I was very afraid for many years to talk about who I was and talk about my struggles in embracing my ethnicity. And to be fair, I regret that I waited so long to advocate for us. I didn't know that there would be such a vibrant community willing to support me and to embrace me. And, I do regret that. So like I said before, there is nothing more powerful than someone who is unafraid to be themselves. And I encourage you all to be yourself. And hopefully, through my journey and, through the leadership of so many others that are in the industry, let that be a signal to you that you can be what you can see. And luckily for us, we're at some of the highest levels in our industry. So you should not be afraid, to speak up and challenge.
Thank you for sharing that, Eric. And it's such a great start of the day. And really love what you said about being unafraid to be yourself. I think all of us, even what Bernice was saying, people in the chat were saying they needed to hear this story. So it's really great inspiration for all of us. You also mentioned that, I know during our prep talks, we were talking about how you can be brash, and we love that you're so outspoken. We need more of that in our community. And even
Tell
your,
that to my team. Tell that to my team.
they know. um, and it's amazing, like just the Adweek article that you wrote out. And it would be great if you could even share some tips for our audience and our community on like how can they get started when it comes to using their voice to be able to self-advocate more for themselves.
I mean, the biggest thing there is just remembering that sharing your truth is such a powerful tool. It's a powerful weapon, especially in the workplace, especially in what we do. I'm sure all of you have seen work that represents our community, that you probably saw and was like, that should be better. That should be better. We should be represented better. Do not hold your tongue. And I do know that there are so many moments in which you get frozen, where you need to say something, but you can't. Learn from those moments. Those moments are going to come. Those moments still happen to me all the time, but I've learned to recognize them and understand that there is a barrier. I don't get that, no pun intended. There is a barrier that you need to blast through, and that barrier is your own self-confidence. And just know that what you're about to say, especially if it represents you, especially if it represents your experience and your perspective, is a powerful one. Because again, I do think as long as you trust your voice and as long as you trust what's in your head, it's hard to go wrong. It's very, very hard to go wrong.
Thank you for that. I'm going to ask you a two-parter here. So what do you hope for the API community to move forward, and how can allies help with that?
My hope for the API community, especially in advertising and marketing, is that we continue to rise. Obviously, we have a number of incredible CMOs, Deborah Ye, Minjae Orms, Marvin Chow, all of them I'm very lucky to call mentors and friends, but they will continue to hold the doors open for all of you. And it's up to you if you want to step into those doors. It really is. And my encouragement to you is that you do that, because we need you. We need the next generation of Asian American leaders in marketing and advertising, because one, again, biased, but I love this industry with all my heart, because we can be so creative, and we are creative. Think about all the stories that our grandparents told us, our parents told us. That creativity flows through our veins. And so we need to continue, to expand and continue to influence culture. Because again, I just think that there's an incredible moment right now happening with Korean culture influencing literally everything. That is a moment. This is a watershed moment that we do need more Asian American creators and leaders out there. So I do hope, we continue to see that. I think for our allies is being able to speak our names when we're not in those rooms. A lot of you may be surprised by this, but I've never had an Asian boss in every single company I've been at. Nike, Snapchat, Airbnb, Gap, Facebook, never had an Asian boss. And so a lot of my success, a lot of the opportunities that have come across my desk are because Black leaders, white leaders, Hispanic leaders have said my names in rooms that I'm not there. So continue to build more advocates and sponsors, because we need them. We need them in order for us to get the opportunities we need to showcase ourselves.
I love that. And earlier you also mentioned about opening the doors, and I was seeing in the chat, people are like, they're running through it together. We really appreciate you so much. And we would love to hear, what would you want to do in terms of your legacy as you continue to make a difference as a leader in our industry?
Do my best not to cry in this part. Many times I get asked this question, and there's a lot of easy answers for that, to open the door for us to showcase that we are so much more than stereotypes and biases. My legacy is actually way more fine-tuned. It's way more targeted. And I'll tell a quick story. As I started to do more and more public speaking and talking about me writing the piece, and then it became a lot of other things, I was asked to go on TV live for the first time. And I was so nervous. And it was in an office just like this, except this is my father-in-law's office because I'm on vacation in Jersey, which seems like an oxymoron. And I kick my kids out of my office and I tell them, hey, daddy's about to go on TV. Like, please just go watch this. Go, just get out. You guys are screaming too much. My kids are 5 and 3. And I start to do the live interview. Again, I don't know what the questions they're going to ask. But I remember my wife texting me in the middle of this live interview on TV, and there was a picture of my son watching me live. And I stopped. I stopped because I realized my life was changing in that second. In that split second, my life was changing, and what I cared about was changing, and what drove me was changing. And you can see it on my Instagram. It's one of the pictures I have up there. I realized in that moment that if the only thing my kids remember about me is just being a businessman or a marketer, then I didn't do a good job with the rest of my life. So when I think about my legacy, for me, it is hoping that they see me, that my kids see me as someone that defended them, that fought for them. And hopefully that they're seen as American. That's the legacy I want for them and for hopefully all the work that I do.